Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Welcome back to our episode of FitBody Lifestyle. We're so happy that you've joined us today. I'm here today with Papa Bear.
Hold on.
We are going to be discussing the different divisions, female divisions in the NPC IFBB bodybuilding organization. And we will be breaking those down and talking a little bit about why you might choose one over the other. Do you want to give us a check-in word first?
No. The check-in word is curious. So, and I'm curious about how the year shapes up. 2024 was an amazing year, and 2025 as we set with the fit model division in particular, which we'll get into a little bit today, and just kind of how the year progressed and what the opportunities are for 2025. So I'd say curious is a good check-in word for me.
I love that. And we're really going to break this into two different sections. So we'll have this week, we're going to talk about the different divisions. And next week, I want to talk a little bit about the announcement of the natural shows, which did start last year, and there have been some in the past, but they're definitely ramping those up to the next level. So if you're interested in that too, definitely make sure you look for the episode coming in part 2. So first, we're going to just jump in and talk about. You want to start with talking about the fit model first, since I know people are really interested in that new division.
I guess we could do it that way, or we could save it till the end. Because let's save it till the next part, okay? And I think I think our primary focus is talking about the women's division. So
Yeah,
we will touch on. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That's okay.
I will in the men's divisions. I mean, the men's divisions really remain unchanged. There's men's open bodybuilding. There is 212. There is classic physique, men's physique. So those are the men's divisions. Those remain unchanged. Yep. So I don't, if you're a male and you're wondering what division to choose from, and if you've competed, you probably know your division, and this is going to be a theme that will run through the women's as well. But if you're not sure, then basically I would say this is that if you have well-developed lower half legs, then that's going to open up some more opportunities to you. If you are not as well developed in your legs, then men's physique is that class that is probably the entry class for the men's side, and that's a big oversimplification.
Yeah, I was just going to say the one change that has been made is they did add a weight cap to the men's physique division. In the pro division. That has not been added yet to the amateur division, but it's an important thing to think about. So I know that there is some talk about, judging somewhat, the lower body as well. So people aren't just only building muscle in the upper body.
That's accurate. So,
but it's certainly, like you said, it's not the same as the other divisions where the balance and the symmetry and all of that is as crucial, because they do have the board shorts on covering.
I would describe the differences is that in men's physique, the lower body is judged from a complete physique point of view, but not from a detail, muscle separation, size and symmetry and all the other things that go into the men's open categories, the 212s, the classic physique. It's just a little bit different. It's really more to present that aesthetic that is more men's physique. And it's interesting you talk about the weight cap, because we did have an acquaintance of ours that competed, and he'd be over the weight cap in the pro category, but he was able to compete in the NPC and get his pro card, and his response I thought was great, which was, "I'll worry about that after I get my pro card." And I did. I thought that was kind of I thought that was an interesting thing. So, but it is, if you're in that category, it is something to keep in mind. But if the goal is the pro card, then figuring out which division is best suited for you, how much you can grow, those are primary drivers, I think, for the men's divisions that you want to take into consideration.
Agreed. So jumping into the women's division, we'll start from we're going to, I mean, there's the women's bodybuilding, women's physique. We're not going to spend as much time on that just because I feel like there's less people currently competing, especially at some of the amateur levels in those divisions. So I'm going to jump in with figure. The
Your division.
Right. That's the division I competed in and turned pro and did the Olympia in. It's definitely a lot more muscular and dense than it was when I was competing in that division. And it's still all about balance and symmetry. There is the highest level of conditioning um, for all the categories that we'll talk about. And I think it's really important to bring that up because I know for a while I had people, thinking, oh, I want to do figure because I'm bigger. And in their minds, they weren't thinking, they were thinking they didn't have to get as lean, which is just the opposite.
Right.
So I think it's really important to point out that the conditioning level for that particular division is much higher. They are they don't want to see striations and feathering in the quads or anything like that. But what they do want to see is a good amount of detail and separation in the muscles.
Right. And I do think that overall symmetry and presentation aspect, obviously the women's figure is the first division where they're posing in heels versus physique and bodybuilding. They're in bare feet. That does add a dimension of femininity to the to that division, that class. And again, it's not to suggest that the other two are not, but it does add that element to it. So I think that's one of the reasons why they're not looking for the striations and the I mean, you need to be conditioned, but I would say it's maybe short of what some people would describe as being peeled. But again, it depends on the show and how it's judged. But within everything that we're going to say and we're going to talk about here, everybody should realize that show to show class it's going to vary. So we're giving you general concepts of what are stated in the criteria, and if you're curious about the criteria, you can pull it up on NBC News Online.
And just to say, the reason it varies is not really because the criteria
No.
changes. It's because the judges can only judge what's in front of them. So if everybody comes in more conditioned than they should be, then somebody who's more conditioned than they should be is going to win because that's what they have to choose from.
That's right.
And vice versa if they come in and they're less conditioned. So I just think that's an important thing to say. If you're thinking about this as a division, you want to really think about your structure. So most people that do well in figure are going to have a little bit wider clavicle structure. They're going to have a little bit more broadness in their shoulders. That's something you can't change. I mean, your structure is your structure. Now, obviously, you can change your muscularity and your overall shape. But when we're talking about structure, if you're going to want to go far in figure, that's really important.
Right.
Getting
those wide lats and being able, and your lat insertions, and do you have a high insertion, do you have a low insertion, and how that affects your waist and your overall symmetry. Those are things that are definitely factors that play into that overall presentation in figure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's really about the balance. Like I said, one thing I did want to point out about figure, and people will ask me this sometimes, is that, oh, do their glutes not need to be as developed as some of the other divisions? Now, leaving wellness out, because we're going to talk about that one next, and that one's very particular. One of the reasons that I want to say that figure glutes might not look as big is because the posing. Because the idea is to emphasize the upper body, you're not going to be tilting forward, or you're not going to be arching quite as much your pelvis to push the glutes back, because you're emphasizing, the lat spread in the upper body. So in my opinion, that's why you're not seeing, if they were to pose more like a bikini athlete or more like a wellness athlete, you'd see they have good development in the glutes. So it's not like you can ignore that or not develop the lower body or the glutes. Like, everything really ideally will be in balance.
That's a great point. And just think about the difference in the back pose between bikini, wellness, and figure. Is that the bikini back pose, wellness back pose are legs apart, and the figure back pose, it legs together. And while we would discourage anybody from flexing their glutes in the back pose, even in figure, there is adductors, that adductor development and that hamstring development and figure is much more pronounced than what is desired in bikini. Is that adductor and development in the wellness is something that is definitely something judged, but in figure, it is also a factor that they are looking for more development in the hamstring and in the adductor muscles. And one of the ways to show that a little bit differently is in that back pose where your legs are together.
Exactly. And if you're wanting to know more, because the figure suits are different, we did
Right.
do an episode with Margaret from Toxic Angels where she breaks that down a little bit. But the suits are a bit different, and with posing, it is quarter turns,
Right.
so we're showing a front, both sides, and the back. So I kind of wanted to more just cover though why you might choose to go the figure route. So if you're someone who has that nice wide clavicle structure, you've got a good amount of muscular development all over, you've got good balance and symmetry, and or these are all things you're working towards, of course, then this is a good division for you.
And maybe we should kind of back up a little bit and just kind of insert this thing. And I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but a lot of the division selection is going to be dependent on how you like to train. If you are somebody who likes to go into the gym and push heavy weights and just be that beast mode and train heavy and lift heavy, and that's going to affect how the division that you select. And I'm not saying the bikini girls don't, because they do, and we've seen it, train heavy. But I do think how you want to train is going to be affected, or is going to at least factor into the division that you select. Along with how do you want to look in the off season, because figure competitors, physique, and women's bodybuilding may carry more weight in the off season in order to promote that growth. The bikini and fit model wellness is kind of maybe a little bit in between, but they're going to carry a fair amount of off-season weight to promote that growth.
Well, not just to promote the growth of more weight, because they just have more
They have
mass,
more
more muscle
mass,
mass.
right? More density, right?
Yeah, and from the training perspective, I just want to interject though too that like it depends on what you started with.
True.
So if I'm wanting to do figure, let's say, and I'm already more lower body dominant in terms of my muscle, I'm still going to have to pull back on my lower body training and push
Correct.
my upper body training more. So the training aspect is really going to depend on, where your starting point is and then where you want your ending point to be. So if you need growth all over and your goal is to do figure, then you're going to be able to, you know, train equally
Yeah.
everything. So, again, kind of coming back to that balance and symmetry. But I think that's a good like
Segue.
segue into wellness, because, if wellness is the goal, wellness is the idea of wellness is it's the only division that you're not looking for symmetry in. So you do want to have more development in the lower body than in the upper body.
We
And
could call it the division of asymmetry, in fact. Yeah.
exactly. And so, whether or not, let's say you decide, I really want to do wellness and you're pretty equally developed, you might have to pull back on training for your upper body and amp up your training on your lower body. But even within that, let's because we know the lower body development is important, it's also important though that there's symmetry within the lower body.
Right.
So you don't want to have giant quads, small glutes, big, hamstrings.
Calves, or yeah.
Everything should be equally developed within the lower body. Then the upper body as well should be all equally developed within the upper body, but the upper body to the lower body is where the asymmetry comes in.
Yep.
So, and there's a lot of people who have played sports when they were
Mhm.
younger, things like that, and they're already, a little imbalanced. And so that really was one of the reasons that they created the division, because as women, a lot of times we are a little bit more developed in the lower body. That might just be genetically how we're built too. I mean, you think about, the pair, we talk about apple or pear bodies, things
Yep.
like that. A lot of women, and again, I want to say something similar that I said with figure. Sometimes I've had ladies think, oh, well, I'm big in my lower body, I should do wellness. If it's muscle, yes. If you just carry most of your body fat on your lower body, by the time you get lean enough to step on stage, you're no longer going to look wellness.
Yeah. I think wellness was popularized in South America, and Brazil in particular. And one of the most popular sports in South America is football, or soccer, as we would call it. And we do see a lot of former soccer players that just have that lower body development from years of doing the sport, just transition fairly well to that. We've seen other sports too, gymnastics. I've seen some people go pretty well into wellness, but yeah, it really is. All these sports really, all these divisions really key into genetic potential, and some I think some women will think that they have a really developed lower body, but is it developed enough for that division?
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've started coaching someone before, and thought initially maybe they were
Mhm.
wellness. And
By the
as
time they leaned out, yeah.
exactly. As we started kind of chipping away, I always tell people, like, when you come to me, especially if you've got 20, 30 plus pounds above where you're ultimately going to
It's kind of
be,
hard to tell.
right.
Yeah.
Like, I always say it's like a lump of clay or a piece of granite, that you're going to create a sculpture and you're kind of chipping away. You don't know what that ultimate sculpture is going to look like until you chip it all away. So, I mean, if you've competed in the past, usually you're going to have a lot better idea than if it's your very first time. And then it's that first time, you get conditioned and then you see what's underneath. You may surprise yourself one way or the other. But I actually had a situation come up not too long ago where I had a bikini athlete compete, and the judges' feedback was they thought she should go to wellness. I knew she still had some conditioning to do. This was kind of a warm-up show where we just wanted to kind of, get her on stage and things like that. And so, it definitely got in her head a little bit. And so I said, let's finish getting your conditioning where it needs to be, get you back on stage. And once we did, they were like, oh, yes, you're definitely bikini. So, and she looked amazing. I think she got second at the show that they told her she was wellness. So it's not like she was completely out of condition, but she
Right.
wasn't quite, it was a smaller local show where the quality wasn't there. So you have to be a little careful, if somebody were to do a small local show, maybe they're not as lean as they're ultimately going to need to be. The judges might go, oh, you look wellness to me because of the asymmetry. I just wanted to put that warning out.
Yeah, and I'm glad you hit on that, and I do think that's very important to kind of talk about just for a second, which is Jamie said this earlier, and well, I'm going to go back to it, which is it depends on who shows up. So the judges are going to judge based on who shows up. So based on who shows up in your category at a show, and if it's a regional show, and there are maybe not as many competitors, and the group that you're compared against all have very thin legs and you're coming out with thicker legs, it doesn't mean, and the judges may give you feedback that based on that grouping that you were on stage with, while you look more wellness for that show, that doesn't mean that you're wellness. It just means that in that show, that's what the judges had to judge against. And in their minds, they may see and we've seen this. I've seen girls in shows go from wellness to, I mean, there's been at least a half a dozen shows I can think of. I saw one girl go from figure to wellness to
Oh, I've seen
bikini.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and they're trying to find their fit. And honestly, that's not a bad way of kind of approaching this from a sample, but what's really going to control that is the sample size. If there is not a sufficient sample size of well-conditioned athletes in your group on stage, you may not get feedback that's going to give you the direction of what division you really belong in, because it again, it depends on sample size. And then the other thing that I think let me pause for a minute. Is there anything else that you wanted to add on that?
The only thing I'll just add on to that, because I think that was really great advice, is that wellness and bikini, you can do crossovers.
Right.
So if you're not quite sure, it's okay to do that. The thing I want to encourage you to think about is, because of exactly what you said, if you go to a bigger show, you're going to get a better idea of where you fit. So if you decide to do that and you're doing a really small local show, maybe there's 3 to 5 people, or maybe there's a lot of people in your class, but the quality's not that high. You're not going to get the best feedback. If that's what you're going to find out is where do I fit, I would choose the most competitive show you can find, so that's going to give you the best idea of like, how do I stack up.
And we'll cover some things to take into consideration when researching shows in our Fusion Hack. So that's maybe a teaser for you to tune into the
for
Fusion
Thursday.
Hack, and we'll talk about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was you're this block of clay coming in, and then when we chip away and we figure out where do you fit. That I want to. This is not about selecting division, but it is a emphasis on the importance of your improvement season or your off season, to make sure that you've really done that work in that improvement season, because you really don't know what you got until you start cutting down. So everybody says, well, do I have enough muscle? Do I have enough? Well,
let's find out.
Let's find out. I mean, we can tell you based on body composition, based on what we see in check-in photos, based on, what your prior photos may have looked like, what you're looking like. But until you've really cut down, until you chip back that clay, we don't really know.
Right.
And you don't know.
Right. And if you're a first time competitor, it's so funny. I'll have people come to me, I don't want to get on stage until I'm competitive. Well, how do you know?
Right.
And so, sometimes what we will do is we'll do like a mini cut or bring body fat down to where you're, no more than maybe 8 to 10 pounds over stage weight. And then we can get a bit better evaluation than we can, when we're maybe
Right.
15 to 20 pounds over stage weight, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, like, don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to, go in with no expectations other than to see, do I have enough? Where do I fit best? Get those questions answered. I mean, it's part of the process.
And I'm glad you said that, because that is the question, that am I competitive? Well, and I'm giving you, I think I've said this before, but one of my infantry school instructor used to say this: use precise terms precisely. And the term competitive is not a precise term, because it's a relative term. In a small show, yeah, you're going to be competitive. In a bigger show, it depends on who shows up and what they look like.
Right.
So
Even in the same show, one class versus another.
yeah. And if you say, well, I don't want to compete until I'm going to win, well, then you're never going to compete, because there's never any guarantee for that. So when you say, if you have it in your mind that you want to be competitive, then add to that what competitive means is that I can look my best. That will make you competitive if you look your best. And if you have competed before and you can look better than you did the time before, then you are competitive because you have improved your physique, which is the whole philosophy and goal of bodybuilding.
Bodybuilding versus body built.
There you go.
Right. It's always a process. And so that's where loving and enjoying the journey is really important. So I feel like we covered wellness pretty well. The only thing I'll add, obviously posing's a bit different. There still are quarter turns. So you are being judged front, back, and on both sides. Again, they're looking for that asymmetry. They're looking for that balance in the development of especially the lower body. In those side poses, they're looking for that density between the quad and the hamstring. So they're looking at the foot's turned to the side a little bit different in bikini than it would be in bikini, so they can really see all of the development. They do like to see a little bit of separation in the tie-ins. They don't want to see striations. They want to see nice, round, full muscle bellies. I do think that people, again, get confused. And I know I mentioned this before, thinking they don't need to be as conditioned. I would say at the top level, when you're looking at those wellness athletes, they are quite conditioned. I mean, I would say they're about as conditioned as figure, maybe
100%.
a little bit, maybe a little bit less, not much.
You might see a little feathering. You might see a little bit more separation in the figure category at the higher levels.
Right.
But you will see, and we have seen a lot of separation in some of the top wellness competitors.
But where I was going with is the big difference is the posing.
Yeah.
So when you're posing in figure, the way you're posing is you're posing to show the lines. When you're posing in wellness, you're wanting to just show a lot of roundness and muscle bellies, a lot of development. So you're really relaxed. The muscles are relaxed when you're posing, and so that's the difference. If you were to, take one of those wellness athletes and have them stand and flex their quads more like somebody would in figure, you'd see the conditioning is pretty close to where it is. So it's a lot of it is the illusion is in the posing. Just don't think that, I'm going to do wellness because I don't have to get as lean. You know what I mean? You absolutely do. You're going to need to get quite lean and then, really push the food to fill out so that you're max filling those muscle bellies so that you show that roundness and fullness, especially in the lower body.
And I would submit to you that wellness is the most difficult posing, in my opinion. And you may have a different opinion than that, but I think that the wellness posing, because you are de-emphasizing the upper body, you are emphasizing the lower body. The poses are that balance between, showing the separation, but also showing the fullness. I think the posing and wellness, it requires the most amount of skill. You can agree. You can disagree.
I would say it depends on the person.
I like it when we disagree a little bit.
I would say it depends on the person and it depends on their structure. Some people's structures really just lend themselves so much to this asymmetry that they're not having to really manipulate those poses so much to create the illusion of it. Whereas somebody who doesn't have the asymmetry, they might be having to like really kind of crunch down the the upper body to create the illusion that it's smaller than it is. But the same applies vice versa. Let's say, if I were a figure athlete and I don't have the symmetry, then I'm going to have to be posing as big as I can.
Fair.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, if you're choosing the right division for you, then the posing is going to be easier. I would just say that. Just one of the things about, kind of backing up, I know we still got a couple more divisions to talk about, but in figure, like one of the most challenging things, and I mean, this is similar in a way with wellness, but in figure, everything in the front pose is front on.
Mhm.
So you can't hide anything. And that creates, to me, a big challenge, because if you don't have the smallest waist, you got to create the illusion by getting as big as you can through, the width. And a lot of people have a really hard time with that lat
Fair
opening.
statement. Yeah.
So I think that's one of the hardest things to teach somebody, which you don't have to do that in wellness. You can
That's
crunch
fair.
it all down and pinch the shoulder blades together. So, it just kind of depends on what you're good at and what your body is most likely to do
Yeah.
easiest. So
And back opening is one of those things that I know a lot of people struggle with. So
a lot. Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about women. I'm talking about men and women.
Absolutely.
We see it in both categories.
Oh yeah.
Let's jump into bikini and fit model, and maybe we kind of talk about those together because they're close, or do you want to talk about them as distinct?
Let's talk a little bit about bikini, and then we'll start
Okay.
integrating into it the fit model, and talk about why fit model came around and things like that. For bikini, it's less development rather than, and when we talk about figure, a lot of times it's referred to as X frame. So in that, it's a very sharp, upper body, V down to a tiny waist, and then, Ving down into like the quad sweep development, So whereas when we're talking about bikini, we talk about hourglass shape. That, I mean, people hear, and I know it's like those two are similar. I know we laugh like, because it's the same shape, but I would say that the difference is we want it more rounded. We don't want it as sharp. You shouldn't be doing a big lat spread. I mean, if you're somebody who has really narrow clavicles and you're in bikini, you do need to open up a little bit so that you can create that hourglass. But it's a little less drastic. We are so excited to announce the 2025 FitBody Fusion Athlete Summit happening in Phoenix, Arizona on Saturday, February the 8th.
This is your chance to learn from the best in the industry, get hands-on posing critiques, and network with fellow athletes.
You'll hear from top pro athletes and get expert advice on everything to get you competition ready and recovered post-show.
Don't miss this opportunity to work one-on-one with FitBody Fusion coaches and even take home some awesome goodies and giveaways while you're at it.
Everyone is welcome, so register now at fitbodyfusion.com and join us on February 8th in Phoenix, Arizona.
Can't wait to see you.
I think what your point is really that in an X frame, your goal is to get the top as wide,
as you possibly
the
can.
midsection is narrow, which is true for both, and then the bottom with as much quad sweep as you can to make that physique an X frame. And bikini, hourglass, yes, an hourglass could be an X, but it's really more just the symmetry of the top to bottom, and with that nice, tight waist. But it's really the waist kind of facilitates the upper and the lower, but you don't want those going out too much.
Exactly.
Not too much quad flare, not too much. The separation is really a big thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So conditioning wise, we don't want to see separation in the hamstrings. We want to see a slight separation around the glute tie-in. So we do want to see that V that you see, that's the tie-in. I know a lot of times people get confused and they think that the tie-in is the separation between the hamstring and the adductor, so the inner thigh muscle. That's not what they want to. They don't want to see that separation in bikini. So ideally, you're not going to see that. But what you will see is the V that outlines where the glute comes down and ties in right above the hamstring, or right on top of the hamstring.
I got,
You got nothing?
I got, well, I mean, it's not that I don't got nothing, but you very well explained that. So I don't
Yeah,
know that there's
perfect.
anything to
Okay,
add.
okay.
Yeah.
So then we could talk. As far as posing for bikini, you have a lot more flexibility in the posing for bikini than you have, I would say, for the other two divisions. I mean, you've got some in wellness, but they are specific quarter turns. Really, bikini's judged front and back, but all the transitions in between can show flaws.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we
Or
talk
can
about
highlight features too.
exactly. So making sure that any movement you're doing up there is only highlighting the best parts of the physique. They don't want to see capped shoulders, but you do need a good amount of roundness in the shoulders. You don't want huge arms, but you want shape in the arms.
And
You want to be
when you
able.
say cap shoulders, I do think I want to pause on that one thing is that no, we don't want to see cap shoulders, but if you're narrow in the shoulder in the clavicular area, you may need to get more shoulder development in order to create that symmetry top to bottom.
Right.
So when you're interpreting these standards, and I think Becky Clausen had a great post a couple years ago when the bikini criteria was reposted and revalidated, is that when you're talking about the criteria, you can't just talk about the criteria in a vacuum. We've got to talk about the criteria as it applies to you and how to best work your body. And one of the things that she put, I think, in her post was something to the effect of when you're applying the bikini criteria, don't think about how that bikini criteria applies to, a top bikini, to a Laura Lee Chapados or, the current reigning Miss Olympia. Don't think about how it applies to her. Think about how it applies to you and how to bring out those attributes and those qualities on your physique.
Right. And if as we're talking through all of this, and I know most people are listening, some people are watching on YouTube, but most people are listening to our podcasts. So I can't show, I did create a graphic with all of these next to each other, but you can do it yourself. Go to the NPC News website, go to the most recent 2024 Olympia page, and look at the winners of each division. And you can even copy paste, put them next to each other. If you're somebody who's like, what do I ultimately want to look like? I know I want to, go far in this sport. This is going to show you what the ideal was most recently. And if you're watching this podcast in a different year, whatever the most recent Olympia is, look and see what's the difference. What did they
Right.
choose? I mean, I think and because if you look at them side by side, you're going to see these differences that we're talking about. It's going to be so much more obvious. If you're looking at amateur shows, the problem is the quality is not there. So sometimes you'll look at a winner and you're like, oh, that's what they want. Well, not necessarily. That was the best of what happened to be there that day. Once you get to the Olympia level, those are the best of the best of the best. So they're getting to choose from, people that are closer to the ideal. So it's going to give you a better vision of what the ultimate goal would be. So that's what I encourage you to do.
Yeah, that's good advice. And as you're looking at that, the best of the best, I just want, again, my advice to you is don't think about being them. Think about how do I put my physique as best as it can be to get to that level. It's not about wanting to be somebody else. And I know this is a comparison sport, but you've got to work with your own structure, your own strengths, your own opportunities, and figure out how can you best optimize your physique for that division.
Right. And I would say, talking about bikini, of the other two divisions we've already talked about, but I would say one of the big differences in bikini is you're going to see a lot of different shapes.
Yeah.
If you talked about Laura Lee, she's a taller athlete. She's got a little bit longer torso. She's got a little bit different tie-in shape. Let's say if you're a shorter athlete, maybe you want to look at some of the athletes that are at that level that are, more similar to your shape. Amy Delgado, who's, she's closer to 5'3", 5'4", something like that. Whereas, and she's got very long tie-ins that are, kind of come down almost to the middle of her hamstring kind of thing. So, there are so many different like shapes and things, and there's not only one that does well in
Right.
bikini, which is kind of cool. Whereas
there is no what do you want to call it? I want to call it exemplar, but there are a lot of examples or exemplars, but there's no. I would not say there's no one.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas like in figure, we talked about if you don't have a wide structure up top in your clavicle, your
It's
shoulder
going to be
structure,
challenging.
it's going to be very challenging as you go further in the sport. It's not going to be the right choice for you. If you're somebody who has a really difficult time developing your lower body, wellness is probably not going to be for you. Whereas I feel like with bikini, there are a lot of different shapes and sizes that can ultimately fit into bikini.
And as we transition to fit model, I think, is that a good point to segue into fit
Good
model?
segue. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that as we transition into fit model, and we'll talk about that, that was how bikini started. Bikini started where fit model was. And if you've looked at the post for the fit model, I mean, they're using Ashley Kaltwasser's pictures from 2014,
18, I think.
Was it 18? I thought it was 14.
I think it's 18.
Whatever it is. But they're using her pictures as a IFBB bikini competitor.
Yes, at her Olympia win that year.
Because it was supposed to be an entry level division that did accommodate more shapes and sizes and more variety. And I still think that's going to be the case with bikini. I don't think that's necessarily going to change, but I do think as fit model opens, there's going to be, first of all, in the first year of fit model, the thing that I would tell you is that how it's judged this year is going to kind of shape and mold that category. I said this to an athlete recently, which is the cool thing about considering fit model is that you get to help inform how that division is formed, because it is
you're getting in on ground level.
You're getting on the ground level.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in the same way that the initial athletes that got into wellness were able to kind of shape that division, but that division, like all the divisions, is going to evolve. We talk about men's physique a lot in terms of how it has evolved from what it started as to now where it is, and the weight cap is it is the mechanism that's put in place to put a little bit of control over the amount of muscle that's put in that category, because it was getting the guys that were competing in men's physique look like men's bodybuilders, men's open bodybuilders. So there's a desire to kind of keep those distinctions between the divisions.
Right. And, it's really difficult to keep a division. A division is introduced and announced, and then as those athletes that compete in that division keep getting more and more development, it can be challenging to keep that from growing. And that's basically where we are with bikini right now. So Fit Model was brought on board to be, as you said, that entry level category. This year, it will only be amateur. There won't be any pro shows because, of course, there's no pros yet. So it's going to be added to the NPC shows, both at the regional level as well as at the national level. So there will be pro cards awarded, and the next year they'll start having the pros compete. The one thing that's different about, there's multiple things, but one of the things that's different about Fit Model is if you choose to compete in that division, you cannot cross over. So you have
in the same show.
Correct. So so you could do one show in Fit Model and a different show in bikini, but you can't cross over within the same show. So I think that's an important thing to note.
Mm-hmm.
The suits are different, no bling on them, no connectors on them. If you go to, any of the suit makers' websites, most of them have examples of that, but they're just plain, which is nice from this perspective. It saves a little bit of money. I think that the athlete that's really great for Fit Model might be somebody who, looks at the bikini division and they're like, wow, I don't really have that level of development yet, but I'd love to get on stage this year. I think Fit Model would be great. And the cool thing about Fit Model too is that as you continue to put on more muscle, you can evolve into bikini. It's kind of cool that like now you have these different levels. And so it's almost like, and maybe you don't want to develop more. Maybe you like that size and you want to stay that size, you say Fit Model. That's okay too. But if you're somebody who likes to train really hard, you're not big enough for bikini, you can do Fit Model and then keep training really hard and develop and continue to move. So I love this idea of, finding your fit where you are now and then also having options to be able to, develop further into it. The posing is a little bit different than bikini. Most of the poses are the same except the front pose. It's the original bikini front pose when bikini first started. So it's feet apart, the hip tilted back. They're still looking for the hourglass.
Yeah.
It's just not as much development and the conditioning is not going to be as extreme. So they don't want to see really the tie-in lines. It should be kind of just that faint, you're seeing the shape of everything, but you're not seeing that real deep separation.
And I know there are others in the industry that have called it out or been calling for an entry-level division for a while. I do know that my beautiful wife here has called for it. God, maybe 4 or 5 years ago is when you were calling for that. Just because of the way that the bikini was developing, and when you think of bikini came in as a mechanism to draw more athletes into the sport because figure was getting so developed and so you know the amount of muscularity was a lot. So then bikini came in, and you've seen how bikini has evolved now into what it is, and what it will be, because I'm sure that Fit Model will influence some of that development and some of that evolution of that division. But it bikini has in some ways become difficult, a barrier to entry for somebody who wants to get into the sport. And so the whole purpose of the Fit Model division is to make that entry level for people. But it's not just a, hey, I look good in a bikini, I'm going to show up to the show. It's you've got to have that. And I'm just looking at the standards here.
It's Fit Model.
That's right. A foundation of muscle, which gives shape to the female body. However, the amount of muscle should be less than seen in bikini. I think that statement kind of says it all.
Right.
You need to. It's not just about being in shape; it's having some muscle. And I think that how this is going to shape and evolve this year is going to be very interesting, and why I go back to my check-in word of curious.
Yeah. I think we're all curious to see, how this first year goes, who shows up, what looks the judges are gravitating towards. And I know we can come back and do another podcast as things develop, this year, watching how Fit Model continues to look and develop in the amateur ranks. And then of course next year as the pro shows are introduced,
Right.
and start to see what that looks like. But I definitely think, not everybody wants to carry as much muscle.
Right.
Some people kind of want to, again, this is not somebody who's never worked out before. You should have a good foundation and base of muscle. But it's just,
We have seen, and this is I can think of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, somebody walked into a fairly large regional show that we were at, and they won the overall, and they said that they'd basically been training for 6 weeks before going into the show. And that was not uncommon. We've seen that. And at the regional level, that you could still walk into certain bikini competitions and do fine, having never touched a weight or just doing some minimum, again depending on who shows up.
it also
Right.
depends on what your background is.
That's right.
If
Yeah.
if you grew up doing sports and
Right.
you know what I mean, some people have just have a foundation of muscle, and some people genetically, so each person's a little bit different.
And
But
there's a difference between showing up and competing, and we go back to being competitive, and then progressing through the sport into the divisions. Going up to those next levels, getting that pro card, getting on the pro stage, getting to the Olympia stage. That where we're talking about this that's kind of really the theme. Is this is not just a bucket list item. If it's just a bucket list item, then you're going to get on stage and it's going to be a one and done thing, because that's what bucket list items are. But if it's a thing that you are passionate about, shaping your physique, evolving your physique, getting better, bodybuilding versus body built, that's really more our intention, is to kind of talk about how to do that.
yeah, I agree. And so again, like with Fit Model, a lot of times people, if I would liken it to maybe somebody who is in an ad for, Aloe or Lululemon or something like that. Kind of like a physique of somebody who, teaches, different types of classes, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like somebody who's got that athletic. They look like they've been athletic, but they're not they don't look like bodybuilders per se, which I think is really cool. I think
Like that they work out.
right.
That they train hard. That they're physically fit. That they have great symmetry and shape. That I honestly, I think about Sports Illustrated, swimsuit models, but man, there's been such a variation on that spectrum that I don't know that I
That's
can
why I
cite
like.
that.
That's why I like more of the fitness.
Yeah, and even with that, Aloe and Lululemon, I see such a
That's
variety
true.
of
That's true. They're
physiques on theirs.
highlighting
Yeah.
different types of
And they're
bodies
doing it, and come on, why do they do that? They're doing that to sell. They're doing that to sell
to attract
products,
to
right?
different people. Yeah.
Because people want to be able to envision themselves in that outfit or whatever. So, but I do think you're right. Is that and here as we say, we're talking a lot about what we think it's going to be. At the end of the day, what it's going to be is what
Yet to be
is
determined.
right, is how it's executed. So every great plan, what's I think I've shared this with you, the military phrasing of no plan survives first contact. So there is criteria. That criteria must then be interpreted by a judge or applied by a judge and interpreted by that judge. And then when you have a panel of 5 to 7 judges, each of those judges is reading the same criteria, and the criteria is stated. I mean, it's in black and white. It's in on the page. And I've given this analogy as well as a lawyer. This was not uncommon for me in court. Is that or appearing before a judge? A judge would read the same statute I was reading, but his interpretation or her interpretation of that statute or that case law was always going to be their interpretation. It was going to be backed by other cases of similar fashion, but at the end of the day, it was their interpretation and application of that statute or case to the thing that was right in front of them. That is no different than what we are talking about in this sport, which is it's the judges that are taking the criteria that are written and they are applying that based on who is in front of them. So, the cool part about this and the exciting part for me is just to see how it evolves over time. And especially in this first year. I mean, if you're an athlete and you have been thinking about competing, the opportunity to compete first year in a new division, man, that's exciting. That's exciting. And yeah, it may be a little bit all over the map in terms of how it's judged based on the show and show to show and who shows up. But the opportunity to participate in the first time of anything, that's exciting. I think about the first year of men's physique and how exciting that was, and first year of women's bikini and how exciting that was. And this is that, and we get to experience that in our lifetime.
Well, and I mean, a lot of the athletes that are reaching out and asking me, do I fit in this division? What division? It's typically the ones that, maybe they've been working towards bikini and they're hard gainers. They're those people that it's just really challenging to put on muscle. I mean, just genetically, but they look great.
Yep.
They're beautiful. They have, beautiful shape and, some muscle, but, it's not yet kind of what they've been working towards. And I'm like, this is perfect for you. One other thing I did want to mention before we wrap up Fit Model, because I think this might be also a factor that attracts some people, is that there's going to be more coverage on the suit in the back. And I know some people may not, like how tiny the suits, bottoms are in bikini.
Right.
And so this is going to cover, like, I believe it's a third or half of the glute. So it's going to be a little more coverage from the back too. So it's a little more conservative from that perspective. So, but it's going to, again, I agree with you. I think it's going to be really fun to see how this evolves, and it's going to be fun to continue to cover it here. And we will be at lots of shows and watching plenty of people competing in this new division. So we'll definitely be coming back and letting you guys know what we're seeing and how it's evolving, and, whether or not it might be the right division for you.
And again, I hope my excitement is telling you that if you haven't competed or have thought about competing, or you're thinking about competing, this is the time. I mean, do it this year, get on stage, see where you fit, see how you like it. The opportunity to get up on stage and showcase that hard work in the gym is just that is an opportunity for you. We when we're at the gyms and we see people working hard, and there's a lot of people in the gyms that just work really hard, and what an opportunity to showcase that and go through that experience and see if you like it. And it's like anything. If you don't ever do it, then you're never going to know whether it's something that resonates with you. And you may just find a passion that we have for the sport that you may then share with us. We love that.
Yep. So I think we pretty much covered everything we wanted to cover for today.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us.
And remember are you looking at me because I get to do that? Like, comment, subscribe, leave your reviews. And we really do appreciate those. We gave some New Year's challenges for goal setting, and we had a few people that put their goals in, and I'm going to cover a few of those in maybe not our next episode, but a couple episodes. I want to see if a few more people join in. So we don't really, I guess the challenge that I'll put out to you today is get on stage. Just get on stage. If you're in that thing thinking, man, I really love bikini, but I don't know if I fit, get on that fit model stage. If you're a bikini competitor and you just think, I just need something different, get on that fit model stage and just see how it goes. And if you're not sure which division you go in, well, do one show at fit model, one show in bikini. And if you're not sure if those are your categories, get on in figure, get on in wellness, get on a bikini. Just get out there and have fun with it, because it should be a fun experience.
Well, and a little plug, I mean, our coaches do
Yep.
consultations, and so if it's something you are thinking about and you'd like to talk to somebody who has expertise, then you can do a free consultation just going to fitbodyfusion.com and put in your application, and somebody will reach out and chat with you about it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so like, comment, subscribe, leave your reviews, and remember the 3 B's: be good to yourself,
Be good to each other.
and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.